The I was mentioning that for American Jews, we don't necessarily write so much new keynote and new poetry because we're living a religion within a world, a different world. But for Israelis, that integration of nation and culture and religion has given birth to this enormous creativity. And I was just um, uh, sort of putting forth the thesis that all secular poetry about October 7th and by extension about Judaism is really religious poetry. And we'll look at some that you might on the surface call a secular poem, and then I think we'll ask that question of, is this a secular poem, is this a religious poem? Again, I haven't heard anybody discuss this. Obviously, this whole idea of all of this poetry is new. There's been like an avalanche of it. I keep seeing more and more of it. I saw a 30-page document that transformed, and these are by religious Zionists, transformed all of the keynotes to integrate ideas about October 7th, all the classical keynote. And I don't know if congregations in Israel are doing that. I don't even know what Israelis are doing with the avalanche of poetry, because I was talking to one Israeli, one lifetime Israeli, and I was showing him a book of Israeli post October 7th poetry. And he said to me, only an American could have a whole book of it. He said, Israelis, we can only look at one a month. And there's a difference, I guess, for an Israeli and an American. I'm studying it as a kind of as Torah, as sort of as Torah, and sort of as an academic study. And so I don't know if either of those are accurate. Maybe both of those are accurate. But obviously, I don't want to also lose track of the meaning of it. Now, last night I played. I'm going to start with Kinat Be'eri. Actually, I think I'll start with a different one. So I'm going to start with a poem that is by an author named Asaf Gur. Asaf Gur is he's an Israeli journalist. He's the editor of Yediot Achronot. Now, one of the things to understand about this Israeli poetry is it's coming from everywhere. The thing that we played last night from
I'm just, yeah, I'm
was
and then
like
we've seen the three, you're like, I read it,
Yeah,
right? Then we've seen the three Trump appointees completely reverse it. So when Donald
who's like a religious paitan and an acclaimed composer, he was writing a kinna. That was definitely quite religious. But it's also coming from, people in Israel. We're going to look at one poem by a woman who's a yoga teacher and a poet. And I don't think she's religious, based just on looking at her Facebook page, whatever. Now in Israel, what does that mean? Israel's not just secular and religious. It's not that way. It's an enormous spectrum. This summer, I heard from a woman who introduced herself as a secular rabbi at a secular kibbutz, and she's not the only one. There are programs now that are ordaining people, and it's not the same program that I went through for ordination, but there is a need. It's just sort of what I mentioned upstairs, that just like the person who made that movie is a secular Israeli who is trying to encounter Judaism again, Jewish culture, trying to figure out what does Jewish tradition mean for him. All of secular Israeli society, I think especially after October 7th, but even before, is trying to come to terms with that. And so this poem, at first when I looked at this poem, let me hand it out to you. Send those down that way. Down that way. This is a poem by Asaf Gur, and as I mentioned, Asaf Gur is from what I can tell from his photos, I don't think he's very religious. But again, that means something different. In Israel, you can't bifurcate just secular and religious. But certainly his work is not being a religious poet. His work is being a journalist, and you'll see his journalistic sensibilities come into this poem. Now, one of the questions, the reason I want to do this poem first is because I think it touches on the question of religious versus secular poetry. In this poem, he takes umbrage with, he criticizes God, right? And you might think on the surface that that's not a very religious poem. to take God to say basically, God, you're not around. But I point this out a lot during the keynotes reading upstairs. I actually think that it's a very traditional mode of doing Tisha B'Av poetry, right? Whether it's the kinna that we read this morning of Eiko, right? All the times in the Torah when you said, this is how it will be for the Jewish people, your children will be like the stars of heaven. Where is all that? Where are you, God? A lot of the keynote ask God, where are you? You were not present to save us. Another good example is I'm blanking on it right now, but we have several examples of that really do. They say you promised us all these blessings. We're supposed to be your beloved ones. We have this covenant. Where is it? Where are you now?
For 740.
And so, in a way, this poem, even though you might think it to be criticizing God, I think it's actually, in the sense, very religious. I mentioned on Shabbos that Tisha B'Av is called a holiday, and the Kabbalists asked, why is it called a holiday? I mean, it's called a moed. In fact, we don't say tachman, sad prayer. We don't say that on Tisha B'Av. Why? Because there's something. Now we usually think it's joyous because seeds of redemption are in the ashes of destruction, but there's a Kabbalist who says no, it's much more than that. It's that you're close to God. Let's say on Simchas Torah, you're close to God then, but you're actually very close to God on Tisha B'Av, because it's God's absence that makes the heart grow fonder. It's God's absence that makes us reach out and say, God, where are you? That's actually a deep intimacy, much more so than just sort of ignoring. Tisha B'Av, being able to say, where is God? That is actually a great act of intimacy. So let's look at this poem. Exactly. Did I say there's an absence? Yeah. Right at the end of that movie, right, the temple is the place of God's dwelling. The temple is destroyed. The Shekhinah is gone. The divine presence leaves. Whatever that means. I don't know what that means. God is infinite. But on some level, right, and with great destructions, the Holocaust, right, we often say there's Hester Panim. God's face is hidden. So I don't know. Is that very different than saying God is right? Even the rabbis, right? It seems like sacrilege. The rabbis change Micha Mocha Ba'elim Hashem, who is like you, O God, in war. Micha Mocha Ba'ilmim Hashem, who is like you, O God, who is mute, because Titus came in and destroyed the temple, and you said nothing. So that's your great strength. Well, that sounds a little like heresy. I mean, the idea that God is weak and can't do anything, chooses to be mute. I mean, it's not really, because obviously God can do what God wants. And there are times in history when obviously God is very hidden from us. There are times in history when God is very revealed, right? When during the Holocaust, that is the greatest hiddenness of God. A few years later, when Israel becomes a nation, and we win wars that by all obvious means we shouldn't win, that's God's revelation. Sure. No, I agree. Yeah. No, I think that's true. But it's interesting that it's a very traditional method of writing, recognizing that it's not. No, the other way to go is to say there's one theme, and that is because of our sins we've been exiled from the land, and God's entirely present. This is exactly what God says he's going to do if we don't keep the code. But those two are very different approaches. Saying no, God is not as present as God should be. That's what a lot of people say, right? You made a covenant. You promised us, and you didn't keep it. Right? That's what some of the Kinnos say that. It's a different approach than because of our sins we've been exiled. Okay, so let me look at this poem. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Right? So even in the secular world, in Israel, everybody knows that line. Right? Great and sanctified is God's great name. The af echad loba. So the poet says, I need to share my screen with those. All very polite. Can you see at home? Should be able to. No way.
Yes.
Yiskadal Yiskadash Shmei Rabbah v'af echad lo ba. Great and sanctified is the great name, but no one came. Right now, in English, that doesn't really work. The person I know the person who translated it. Her name is Rachel. Rachel. I get her last name, but I have studied some poetry with her in Israel, and she said we weren't sure how to translate the first line. Should we say "Great and sanctified is your great name"? But no one came, or should we say Yiskadav Yiskadash Shmei Rabbah and nobody came? So in English, neither works great, but they decided that the first line would work much better as Yiskadav Yiskadash. Now in Hebrew, of course, Rabbah is the word ba, to come, with a ration from. Ration, Rabbah, means great. Great and sanctified is God's name. But the word ba'af echad lo ba, no one came. So on the one hand, it's like in Hebrew is an amazing way to write poetry because English has a lot of words. Hebrew does not have a lot of words. The entire language comes from one book, Tanakh. And so you have very many multiple innuendos in a way I think that it might be less so in English, because English comes from different language sources, and Hebrew only comes from one really language source. And there's not as many words. So nobody came. So nobody came. That could blame who? What could that mean? Right? He's talking about on the 7th of October, no one came. Could be the soldiers, right? We know the soldiers didn't come, right? Because the army wasn't on top of it. So is this blaming the soldiers? Well, if you begin with the line, Yiskadav Yiskadash Shmei Rabbah, great and sanctified is God's great name, and what rhymes with that is Yaf echad lo ba, and no one came. Not even, by the way, it doesn't say, but in Hebrew, in English, it's and no one came. But in Hebrew, it's V'af echad lo ba. That means no one came, but think about what else that could mean. And even echad lo ba. Who is echad? Well, we know who echad is. Echad is God, right? You wouldn't get that in English. So I think he's doing both here. It's masterful, actually. Right? He's blaming the army, I think he's also blaming God. Kama alafim harulo b'Shabbat baboker. How many thousands called out to him on Shabbat in the morning? Now that's obviously talking about God. Za'aku et shemo. They cried out his name. Itchanenu b'dma'ot sharak yavo. They beseeched with tears that he should just come. Now, the beseeching with tears that he should just come, obviously, is after the attack. But Kamal fi kirulo b'Shabbat baboker, what does that mean? Right? Why does he say Shabbat baboker? Why doesn't he just say Shabbat? Or why doesn't he say on the 7th of October? So that could be talking about before the attack. Because if you think about it, right, he's pointing out the irony of when the attack happened. The attack happened on the morning of crying out to God right, it happened on Shabbat morning, which here was Shmini Atzeret. It wasn't Simchas Torah yet. That night was, but here it was at right 7 a.m. when it happened. There was the middle of the night here on Shmini Atzeret. The next morning we were praying for rain. Now in Israel, Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah are the same day. There is no other days of Simchas Torah, and they do all of it. They dance with the Torah, but they also pray for rain. As I mentioned last night with Yigal Arush's song about Be'eri, it's the same tune that's used. We'll talk about Be'eri in a minute. It's the same tune that's used for Kinot is used to ask for rain. I mean, we do a very similar thing here. Why? Because asking for rain is a kinah. It's you're praying to God. You're on the precipice. You don't know, or you can't live without rain. So it's really a dire thing that you're crying out to God about. So the Jews are already. So is this a criticism of God? The Jews are crying out to you, and then we really had to cry. But he rested from all of his work. Now, obviously, he's quoting there from what we know as Kiddush, from Bereshit. Shavas mikom lachto. God rested from all of his work. In other words, it's Shabbos. God rests on Shabbos, right? So, I mean, it's a very ironic sort of thing, right? He's saying on some level, God didn't come because it was Shabbos. God doesn't work on Shabbat. Now, of course, that there's an absurdity in it. And there's a cruelty in that, and there's an irony in that. I mean, it's shocking. Shum Elohim lo higia. No God came, reached us. V'shum Elohim lo hirgia. And no God calmed. Rak hasatan chagag b'li hafra'a. When God's face is hidden, what do you have? Satan. You have the other side. The Satan had a party, right? Now, what day was that? That was Simchas Torah, right? So Simchas Torah, if the Jews are not having a party on Simchas Torah, there's another party that's going on. The Satan is having. Mefazez beine kibbutzim. Satan was dancing between the kibbutzim at a mesibat tevach. Tevach means slaughter, and shrita would be slaughter of an animal. Tevach could mean like a butcher.
But I don't know if I could use my thing out there.
It can also mean the slaughter of people. Tevach, a slaughter. The mesibat tevach, and so the Satan had a mesibat, a party of slaughter. Vasavnu mosis umadveya. And our correspondent goes on to report, right? So here, he's a correspondent. He's the editor of Yedioth Achronot. So here, he is probably mixing in his own personal life into this kinnah. I mean, he's talking about, into this poem. He's talking about the South and what happened on October 7th. And he had to report it. I mean, he is the editor of Yedioth Achronot, right? He had to be he was probably one of the, he had to be one of the first people who knew and reported it. And he had to report it. How does a reporter report something when their brethren are being killed? How do you report that? How do you report October 7th, right? How do you do it without crying? I mean, I think that's, Israel's a small country. Every family knows people who have been killed on October 7th or died fighting. I mean, it's not a big country. Bein levein gam mitafeach. He was in between crying, right? So he's talking about what really happened. Sheyesh tinok saruf, right? Probably this is what he reported. There is a child, there's a baby burned. Yesh tinok chatuf, and a baby abducted. Yesh tinok yatom, there is a baby who is orphaned. Yesh tinok ben yom, and there's a baby who's 1 day old. Mutal mechubar bechevel hatabur legufati mo, still linked to his mother's body by the umbilical. Below he speak afilu legalot mashemo, and there wasn't even enough time to reveal what his name is. Ma yereshem ala matzeva haketantana, what will be carved on his small tombstone. Im ta'arich echad leila deliptira. You die the day you're born, your birth date and your death date are the same. So with the single date. That's how the kibbutz looked after the Satan visited. And then he throws in returning the, back to you, Bob, returning the broadcast back to the studio, right? So he's describing perhaps his own experience being a broadcaster down on the scene. And, on the one hand, mixing in the, there's sort of a mundaneness about, back to you at the studio. But I think that really highlights the tragedy. Achshav sheket yorid. And then now there is silence. Achshav sheket yorid yesh gam shigurim. They are shooting. I'm sorry, yorim. Achshav sheket, now be quiet. Yorim. They are shooting. Ishgam shigurim. They're also rockets. V'ein memshala. V'ein rachamim. There's no government. That's right. Okay. There's no government, and there is no mercy. Rakat sarot v'atspunot. There's just screaming and pictures. Right there, he's thinking about. He's writing the poem not only as a journalist, but also through the eye of those who saw this on TV. Right, for many Israelis. They saw it on WhatsApp and on TV. Lo yatsu le'olamei harosh. It will never leave the mind. Ashvi ba'October, 7th of October. Alpayim esrim v'shalosh. It uses a secular date. I mean, that is what's become, right? It is the secular date that gets used. there's a whole discussion of, do you say Shvi'i b'October? The more correct language would be Shiva ba. Shiva is Shiva, right? So sometimes it doesn't get used. Maybe it should be. It's an interesting question for a poet. He decides here to use Shvi'i b'October. But I think point I want to make about this kina is the amazing religious sensibility of this kina, even though it's very much a secular kina in the sense, I mean, a poem in the sense that, you know, it's about journalism, it's about it's written not necessarily from a religious point of view, but beginning with God and saying God is absent, even though it leaves us unsure about, is he talking about the soldiers or is he talking about God? You know, that of course precisely mirrors the whole notion of for us the destruction of Tisha B'Av, right? Is it our fault that we didn't show up, that we didn't show up for each other, and there was sinat chinam, or is it God's fault that God should have done more? The Holocaust is the same question, right? Is the Holocaust because somehow we sinned, or no? The Holocaust goes beyond any kind of blessings and curses. It's too much, and therefore there's an abdication of it. I just want to share this document with people at home so that you have a copy. Part of this document is my notes, but if you scroll down to about page 4, you'll see the texts that we're doing. Let me just put this in the chat. Just this way, if you can't see my screen well, it's there. But I will share my screen with you. Back to screen. Okay, I want to look now at the Kina of Be'eri. Better. I'm going to hand it out. Sorry. You don't mind? Statement. Oh, actually, you know, okay. Let me share screen with you. This is okay. So this kina is really this is the kina that we did in Shul last night, that we played the music to, and as I mentioned, it's really a work of art. It's by Yigal Arush, who is a Moroccan Paitan. He grew up in Dimona. His grandfather was also a writer of Hebrew poetry and a studier of Hebrew poetry, and he grew up at his feet. And Yigal Arush has a band. He's a composer. He plays Sephardic music. He also has a school of something called Makom, which is a kind of Moroccan Hebrew poetry and music. And he talks about, there's an interview with him in Hebrew online that you can listen to. And he talks about how the tune that he used for this, if you weren't here last night, I'll just play 1 second of it so you can hear it. It's really, it's quite haunting. And if you have, what? Oh, are there? You'll play a couple seconds of it. This is actually, you know what I'm going to do? This is the one that's a little bit longer because it's it has a musical orchestra in the back, but this is him just doing his kina, so it's a little bit shorter. So does that? All right. So that's the tune. You can Google Yuval Harush Kinat Be'eri. You will there's a video of him doing it with the East West Orchestra. The video the music video was filmed in the new library, the new National Library in Israel, which is a national library we're working on for a very long time. It's its own discussion. It's a real work of art, and it's representative of the nation in many ways. It's trying to be. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that they did it there, because it really represents the kind of rebuilt Israel. And so even by filming it there, right, it brings up the question of what does it mean to have an Israel that is strong and rebuilt, and yet to have this kind of destruction. The tune that he uses is that tune that I played for you. It's a Sephardic Kina tune, but it's also used, as I mentioned before, on Simchat Torah to pray for rain. And so it adds just a whole other level. I mean, you'll see his wording, so many different mirroring sides, and it's like a prism. But the tune itself, in that it mirrors Simchas Torah and Kinot, right? The two sides of October 7th that we're mourning, but it happened on Simchas Torah. That really comes out in the tune also. It does end with a little bit of hope. We'll see that, as most do. He did point out, which I mentioned last night, that in the South, the places themselves, in the interview with him, he says that the Kina wrote itself. He actually says that he was cooking food for his children, and he had to put the pot down because it all of a sudden came to him. This is in November. And he said the Kina just came into his mind, that it really wrote itself. And he said even the names of the places in the South, Be'eri, my well, Nachal Oz, the stream or the valley of my strength, right? Nachal Oz nafal, Nachal Oz fell, Be'eri hasar, Be'eri has been destroyed, right? These are very powerful poetic images that are all about the destruction of the strength of the Jewish people. And you'll see that Be'eri, or why did you write it about Be'eri? There were, many communities that were destroyed. Be'eri was one kibbutz, but Be'eri means my well. And you'll see that the water image, and of course, this tune that we used to pray on Simchas Torah is used on Simchas Torah is the way that we pray for rain. And so Be'eri and tears, which are the theme of Tisha B'Av, and water, these all they get interplayed in this Kina. And you think about the phrase Miyitain Roshi Mayim, mentioned before, who will give my head enough water and my eyes enough tears? If I had it, I would cry about the destruction of my people day and night. Right, that's from Jeremiah, and we quote it in some of the keynotes. And I think that's that sense of the tears that are so unlimited, that in the depths of Jewish destruction, there's so much lamentation without end. The tears are so unlimited that they form a stream. Right, so a be'er is a good thing. A be'er, a well, is a miraculous thing. The Jewish people have a well that God gives them. God gives us water from a well. Is amazing, because you don't have to rely on the rain coming from the sky. In Israel, it's very hard to get rain. And what is a be'er? A be'er is a source of water. Right. So how does that relate to my tears? Let's take a look at the first paragraph. He says, Eicha, right, it begins with Eicha. Eicha, how is it possible? Be'eri the kibbutz, obviously, but also Be'eri, my well, Hafcha lekivri, has been transformed into my kever. A kever is a grave, into my grave. So what's he talking about here? Is he talking about my well has been transformed into is he talking about Be'eri the kibbutz has been transformed into a grave? Well, both are true, right? I mean, if you think about it, there's sort of an irony in that also. Right, both a be'er and a kever, they rhyme in Hebrew, are holes in the ground, right? But one hole in the ground from it springs forth life, water. But that's what the Be'er was. The Be'er in the desert kept the Jews alive. A Be'er in the south of Israel, a well in the south of Israel, keeps you alive. And yet, another kind of hole in the ground is a symbol of death. And so here he puts them both in the first line, right? Echa be'eri hafcha lekivri. How is it possible, Echa, that be'eri, my well, has been transformed, has changed to my grave? V'yom ma'ori, in the day of my light, ma'or, right? What is my light? My light is the Torah, simchas Torah. Hafach shechori has been changed into darkness. V'hushat kol pri v'ne'apach shiri, and all of my fruit has been destroyed. V'ne'apach shiri, and my singing has been overturned. And now, what's he talking about? What does he mean? My fruit has been destroyed. My singing is being overturned. Obviously, he's talking about simchat Torah. But what is my fruit has been destroyed? So I think it's several metaphors, right? One is they destroyed the crops. That was partly what happened. There have been volunteers going down to harvest the crops because there's no people to harvest the crops, and the crops were destroyed in many cases. But pri also, of course, in the Torah, peru urevu, be fruitful and multiply, refers to children. Right? It's families that were taken, it's children that were killed right in front of their parents, and vice versa, and that were taken captive. It also reminded me of the verse in Jeremiah. Jeremiah is the prophet, the writer of Kinot, of Echa. Jeremiah is the prophet of the destruction. Jeremiah says, Kishtayim ra'ot asami, my people. And I'm wondering, if it's a reference to this, then there's also an inherent criticism in here of the Jewish people. Kishtayim ra'ot asami, two evil things my people did. Oti azavu, they have forsaken me. Makor mayim chayim, me, the source of living waters, says God. That Jeremiah says in the name of God. You have forsaken God. God is the source of living waters. Lachtzov lahem borot, to instead you've hewed out for yourself borot, cisterns, similar word to be'er, well. Borot nishbarim, but these are broken wells that you've made. Shelo yochlu hamayim, which cannot hold water. I, God says, am your fountain of water. And if you ignore me and make your own, then those are not going to. So I don't know. And if this is on some level, either consciously or unconsciously, a reference to Jeremiah's criticism of the Jewish people, because of course, I'm not saying God forbid that there's any justice in this, but the South was a place of secular kibbutzim. Most of the kibbutzim there were secular kibbutzim. There were some religious kibbutzim. Those kibbutzim had less destruction because their gates were. Thank God forbid you can read anything into that. But this idea of the be'er, of the well, is a metaphor in Jeremiah for God's water versus the water that the Jewish people sometimes turn to that cannot really quench them. Eini novot mayim me'omek shivri. My eyes pour out water me'omek shivri, from the depths of my brokenness. And obviously my eyes pouring out water is a very common theme in Jeremiah. By the way, after each word Echa, he has another word, right? The beginning of each paragraph begins Echa something. So the first one is Echa be'eri. How is it possible, my well? Or be'eri, obviously it also means the kibbutz be'eri. And then the second one is Torah, Echa Torah. Echa Torah aruka ustura. How is it, the Torah, so orderly and arranged, and all the Torah's splendor? The Torah is called pe'er. By the way, the word, we don't wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av, because tefillin are called pe'er, beauty. But you know that there's a custom that somebody who gets married, a chatan, puts ashes on his forehead on the place of the tefillin to remember Jerusalem. Why there? Because the word pe'er, which means beauty, which refers to tefillin, and here refers to the Torah, is the same letters. It's an acronym for afar, which means ashes, the ashes of destruction. And so that's why you put it on the place of the tefillin. And so here he says, the Torah, which is so strong, it's so ordered, right? The Shulchan Aruch, set table is the name of our code of Jewish law. It seems strong, the Torah, but Chol Pe'era, all of its beauty, Lo Amad Le'ezra, didn't help us. It didn't come to our help. It didn't stand to help. And is he talking about how could it be that on Simchat Torah, that's when the attack was? I mean, how's that possible, right? That's the day when God is present. Or is he talking, or is he criticizing Torah, God? How could it be that God lets people go? Uvayom Hadaran, on the day of its beauty, Hushchat Ari. My standing has been destroyed. He finishes with his chorus. My eyes pour out water from the source, from the depth of their brokenness. Third one is Yisrael. Hi Yisrael. Right? How is it, Yisrael, Yom Karokel, on the day of their calling out to God, which of course means Simchas Torah. V'chaim Shoel umuhumakibel. We asked for life. Life was requested, but chaos was received. When was life requested? The answer, of course, is that the water as the life metaphor, this is why I think maybe he is referring to Jeremiah, it's that day that they were praying for rain. Zakein, and it would have been that morning that they would have prayed for rain. So actually, many places they did not get to pray for rain because the attack came early. Zakein va'olel, elder and infant, dam mitgolel, in blood they wallowed. Chago chilel, their festival desecrated, oyev achzari, by a merciless enemy. Eini navot mayim me'omek shivrim, my eyes pour out water from the depths of mine. Fourth one, now it's interesting, right? He's chosen Be'eri, my well, or the kibbutz, that this is really all about. Torah, Yisrael, and then he chooses Imahot, the mothers. I have not, by the way, heard anybody interpret the Skinna. I made all this. I mean, I don't know if this is right, so you could disagree. I made all this up 2 days. So I'm telling you the truth. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. Right, but I see. Okay, Biyom Karokel. You're right. That could be it. Yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, that sort of refers back to the beginning, where no, it was in the previous poem, right? Where the question was before or after the attack. Yeah. Here he doesn't have a paragraph of Echa Avot, fathers. He only says Imahot. And this is the second to last paragraph. Echa Imahot. How is it possible? Imahot v'iladot una'arot. Mothers and girls and young women. V'shivi molachot. Taken into captivity, kivmei paraot, like the days of the pogroms. Now, Kishinev, of course, was a pogrom that was also written about by Bialik. Bialik wrote a very famous poem called "The Day of Slaughter" about the Kishinev pogrom. Kishinev was 40, I think it was 45 people that were from. But the Cossacks, there was raping. Kishinev was a terrible pogrom. But often, I guess it's women who are targeted, just like they were on October 7th, because rape gets used as an act of war, and that is perpetrated against women. It took Israel months to get the international community to recognize and not just blame the victims, and to recognize that there really was rape and sexual violence against women on October 7th. It's just shocking how long it took the world and organizations that were made to do that, to recognize, those kinds of crimes, the UN and others. I got to hear from a lawyer who was really at the forefront when I was in Israel. And this whole organizations now that are there really just to document, and documenting it is not easy, because the day that on October 7th, when those bodies, thousands of bodies, came to Shura, which is where they were all processed. There's a base, a military base, that's the base of the rabbinate, and it's where taras are done like in case, if God forbid, 100 people die in war. So they're equipped in this enormous building to do like paras and those kinds of things, prepare bodies for burial. And because people are very, very quickly in Israel, but this overwhelmed them. I mean, nothing was prepared for what happened on October 7th. And because of the kavod hamet, the honor for the dead the Jews had, there were no pictures taken, and the bodies were buried very quickly. So even though there was enormous amount of personal testimony about women who had came in that had clearly there had been just devastating sexual violence, a lot of it didn't get preserved, recorded in the way that it would have in other places. And so people are working on it. But he says, so here he focuses on the mother, women. Nifritzu gidrotzon yesharot, and they broke the fences of the righteous sheep. So that's an interesting reference, right? So what's it talking about? So breaking the fences of the sheep, obviously when you attack a kibbutz, they did break, obviously places where there were sheep. But in the Torah, Gidros Tzon appears when the Jews first come to Israel, right? What happens? The 2.5 tribes, they haven't even entered Israel yet. They get to the eastern side of the Jordan. The 2.5 tribes say to Moshe, we want this land for ourselves because we have a lot of sheep. And we want Gidros Tzon. We want corrals for our sheep and houses for our people. And actually, I think Rashi there says that the Medrash is critical of them. How could they put their sheep first before their families? But the first thing the Jews, in a sense, I think maybe he's referring to this. The first thing the Jews do in Israel when they enter the land is to build Gidrot Tzon, same language, build fences for sheep. And now, of course, also sheep. God is the shepherd of the Jewish people. The sheep who are yesharot, who are straight, who are righteous, that is the Jewish people. Right? God is b'nei marom. Right? God counts us on Yom Kippur, b'nei marom, like a shepherd counts his sheep. Upasku mecholot neginot mishorerim, and the dancing ceased, and the songs of my singers ceased. So what's that talking about? So what do you think that's talking about? The dancing ceased. Right. So that wasn't my first thought. Right? My first thought was Simchas Torah, but I think it's also, of course, it's got to be a reference to the Nova Festival. So it's an interesting idea, right? The Nova Festival, like how as a religious person do you integrate? Right. I think when religious people think about October 7th, I don't know. There's like there's an unsaid thing about October 7th, which we don't want to say because anybody who dies al Kiddush Hashem is holy. But October 7th was not. I mean, people may have seen it as religious, and I think there were religious people there, but it wasn't a religious function itself. But those are also right. He's labeling them Tzon Yesharot. They are the sheep that are straight, that are righteous, right? They all are, because when you die al Kiddush Hashem, you are the righteous sheep. You're the people of God. He is a religious author. Yeah. He's quite he is. Yeah. I'm also theorizing that maybe Imahot is brought here because Imahot, right? Be'eri, my well, and then there was Torah, Israel, and then Imahot. Because if you think about it, what is a be'er is a source of water. It's a well. And he compared it to a kever, to a grave. The word kever has two meanings in Hebrew. It means a well. It also it means a grave. I know this sounds bizarre, but this is the way the Gemara uses it. It also means a womb. Now, a womb in Hebrew is usually a rechem, a womb. But actually, the entrance to the womb, the vaginal canal, is called the kever, and the grave. Now, I guess the pshat is that it's the grave because it's hidden, it's dark, it's inside, it's underneath. But is there perhaps a reference here to the mothers, because a be'er, just like the be'er gives us spiritual life, God gives us spiritual life, metaphor in water. So too the women are the ones that bear children, And now there's been all of this death. And we'll see another poem, we'll do it right after this, which is about the question of how do you rebirth a population if the women have been killed? And then the fifth paragraph is, and I don't know if he made 5 because Eicha has 5 chapters, not sure. You know, he doesn't say much in his interview, but I will read you one line of his that he did say. Ve'echa etma borei ruma, and how, and here instead of right Torah Israel mothers, it's etma. Etma means wonder or shock. Ve'echa etma borei ruma, and how wonder, shock, borei ruma, the one who ennobled her, who created that, right? Borei ruma could mean the one who created the one that is ennobled, the Jewish people, but it could also mean borei ruma, meaning Rome is the Rome Mala is a reference in Hebrew to the sky, to the heavens, to the world of the godly. Borei ruma, God creates the heaven and the earth. Ad an umma tiyeh mehuma, until when will the nation be in upheaval? Now it's interesting that he uses the word umma, right? It's the same letters as ima. Well, it's not. Ima has an aleph at the end. But why didn't he say nation? Now is with an ayin, right? Nation is with an ayin mem. So what do you mean umma with an aleph? It does mean nation. No, Ummah is a nation. Is that how we spell it in Hebrew? Maybe it is. Is with an ayin. Ummah is with an al. Now, so I was thinking to myself also the Arabic word for nation, right? And this is a very important word in Islam, is right? The when the Muslims talk about Muslims as a whole, as a nation, as a religion that is going to be the renewed caliphate and bring the redemption, they are the You have to care about the Wow. Oh, right. Oh, fascinating. Oh, wow. Okay. So does this, right, you know Arabic. Does it fit Aleph Mem Hey with what the Arabic would be? So I don't know if I don't know if any of this was his intention. He doesn't say it. I've never heard anybody say it. It just occurred to me the other day. You know, and maybe he didn't mean it, but maybe that doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what authors mean in today's day and age. But also maybe even unconsciously we can make interpretations that are part of, you know, are meant even if they're not literally. The beginning of it, yeah, it could be. Yeah. Adanu matiyeh mehuma, ad an koma tushval adama, until when will the koma, the stature, fall to the ground? Yatakuma l'ha'ir neri, and now arise up and kindle my lamp. Right? What is the lamp? The lamp is the Torah. The lamp is the Jewish people. Right? The lamp is hiner mitzvah v'Torah or. The soul of a human being is called the lamp. So he's calling on God now. God, it's your responsibility. Ir Neri. It's also, you know, on a letter, when you write a letter to somebody, somebody who is younger, and you want to say to them, you should live a long time and be successful, you write Yair Nero, may his candle shine. That's how you give blessing to somebody, like dear so-and-so, and usually you do it as an abbreviation. So the candle to shine could also mean, right, the youth whose lives were cut short. God, now you need l'ha'ir neri. Ve'ein rachamecha terapei shivri, and from the well of your mercy, heal my brokenness. Ve'eini hanov, right? All the previous paragraphs ended with eini nova mayim. My eyes flow forth water. My omek shivri, from the depths of my brokenness. But this last paragraph ends with Ve'ini hanovot, my eyes that flow, tashke be'eri, they will water the well. They will water be'eri. Right? Does be'eri mean the kibbutz? Does it mean the well? It seems more like it means the well right here. But it's an interesting notion that our tears are what will eventually reverse things. Our tears will eventually nourish Here's a quote from what he said in his interview about this last line. He said, what? He said, Ach kamo shekol kina, just like in every kina, sofa nechama. The end of it is about nechama, it's about comfort, right? Every kina that we read upstairs, or most of them, they end with a sense of like, one day God will rebuild. There's comfort at the end. So kach anu mevakshim shnizkeli wrote b'ayin sulula. So too, we also ask that we should merit to see with a clear eye et hanechama, the comfort, hamagia la'achar, that comes after shaha'ayin nishtafa b'dima, after the eye has been washed. Very interesting notion, right? He's saying that the tears wash the eye, and then you can see more clearly, and that hopefully from that will come some kind of comfort and redemption. Vivinyani reinu ninuka, when our city is rebuilt in comfort. Vashem barachamim yizkenu v'chtov b'mehera piyutei geulate. And he said, God should help us to merit in God's mercy quickly to write the poem of our redemption. So it ends with nekama, it ends with comfort, but the comfort really, I mean, the way that the different lines intertwine is really unbelievable. The notion of the be'er, the well, the flowing water, the tears, and that the tears eventually heal the or restart the or somehow bring back about the water from God, which is a water of Mayim Chaim, of living waters, of Torah, sustenance. That has been what has been damaged, and you start to ask yourself, wow, you know, the book's called Be'eri, that's not just a small thing. It has a lot of meaning. That is the kin of Be'eri. Maybe we'll look next. Switch documents here. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to look at on the other side of the page. That one. Let me hand you out a new page. When was I talking about doing? Oh, the Rechem. There's a very short one. I think I put, oh, very good. So let's hand this out. So just because we were talking about the womb, I think that this following poem really kind of relates to that notion of the womb. It's a very short poem. This is by the yoga instructor I mentioned. She's a poet. She lives in Ganei Tikva. I only know this because I Googled her yesterday. Her name is Gali Ravitz. She does write poetry. She's written more than one poem, but I think mostly she teaches yoga, has 2 kids, and is divorced. That's what I know from her Instagram and her Facebook. But it is interesting that, you know, like Israel poetry, I don't know. I don't remember if after 9/11 there was a burgeoning of poetry. I don't remember there being. There was? There was. Good. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is entitled Kel Malei Rachamim Al Shumma, God full of mercy, Al Shumma, because of what? So she says, Al Shum Shekol Kach, right? We call God Kel Malei Rachamim. So on the one hand, what is Kel Malei Rachamim? Kel Malei Rachamim is the first 3 words of the memorial prayer that we say at a funeral. And somebody has died, and we say it on a yard site. But Kel Malei Rachamim means God who is full of mercy. And the word Rachamim in Hebrew, mercy, is also the root Rechem, womb. So Kel Malei Rachamim, God who is full of mercy, Al Shumma, Al Shum Shekol Kach Harbe Anashim. Why do we need a God full of mercy or full of wombs? Al Shum Shekol Kach Harbe Anashim Yitzruchu Lihibaled. Because so many people need to be born here, mechadash, anew. It's very funny. This was translated by an Israeli. She wrote anew with an E. V'rachem achad lo yuchal, but one womb is not able. So right, really what she's saying in this very short poem is, Hail Malei Rachamim, for us now, doesn't just mean God full of mercy, remember the soul of such and such. It has a different connotation. It has a connotation of God, we need you to reinvigorate life in our world. We need you to be the great womb because so many women were killed. And how do we repopulate? Because to us, a couple thousand, 2,000-3,000 people doesn't seem like a lot, but in Israel, as many have pointed out, right, that equals hundreds of thousands would be in America. It's a small country. Okay, let's do. Rechem echad lo yuchal. Oh, maybe. I don't know. That would mean God's womb is not able. Could be. Could be. I thought she was sort of saying. Could be. It could be both. Okay, this is a poem by Dael Rodriguez Garcia. He actually was born in Jerusalem. He's an Israeli, and there's something about this poem that I find disturbing and comforting. Chayal nofel kamo matbea. Right, in Hebrew, the word for dying in battle is nafal. Person fell. So to fall in English doesn't mean to die. I mean, maybe it does. We use it so much now, but I'm not sure it just comes from the Hebrew. It's used in regular English. Fell into fall in battle. Okay. So chayal nofel. A chayal, a soldier fell, falls, is falling. Nofel is falling. Kamo matbeya lekupat tzedakah, like a coin into a tzedakah box. The nichbat berutot hanachoshet, and bumps into copper coins. Umatzil mimavet. What? Oh, sorry. Baseter hu nofel. Baseter hu matzil mimavet. In hiding or secretly, he falls. They translate it here as anonymously, but it could also mean in hiding or in hidden from view, right? What happens inside the box of tzedakah, you don't see. You just see the coin go in. Hu matzil mimavet. He is saved from death. So this is hard to figure out. What do you mean he's saved from death? So on the one hand, there's an irony here, right? Because we know that the rabbis say tzedakah matzil mimavet. Charity saves one from death. But this person died already. So what does he mean? I don't know what he means. You mean that dying for the country, the person, memory goes on? Does he mean a satyr who matzil mimavet? In hiding, he's saved from death, meaning he really isn't saved from death. He did die. Matzil tzedakah tatzil. Tzedakah will save from death. Who matzil? Who? Oh, he saves. You're right. I'm sorry. Oh, it's in the English translation. I apologize. You're right. You're absolutely right. That's the answer. Is that I didn't look at the translation. Right. You're right. Matzil, saves from death. Matzil. You're right. Matzil also means is saved. Right. That's interesting. Matzil mimavet. Right. I mean, if you want to say he saves us, I guess you could say it that way. Matzil. Right, matzil could mean save, no? What? Oh, mutzal, like mutzal me'esh. Mutzal. Okay. So, right, but if you put it aside, we assume that you've given tzedakah and it will save you from death, the rabbis say. So over here, right, he is the tzedakah that saves from death. It saves from death. It's like tzedakah saves from death, the army saves from death. So he becomes the tzedakah. Umitkarkesh imechav. He rattles with his brothers. Unoshek lifnehem. He kisses their faces for them. I don't know. He kisses their faces to their faces. Achaludim mizat hakrav. Rusty with the sweat of battle. Right. So this is an interesting. Right. These are coins. Coins might rust. And but these are coins and soldiers. There's sweat, there's rust. You can't, you know, people don't rust. Coins rust. Chaludim mizera krav, rusty with the sweat of battle. So this is both, right? The coin and the soldier become the same. Right, because the soldier's gone, but in a way, right? I don't know. The little tiny bit of comfort I found in this was that tzedakah is like a good thing. You know, tzedakah, you put it aside, it's gone. You've lost something, but you've also gained something. You're doing something. You're doing an act that's a much greater act by losing something. When you're a little kid, and if you give money to tzedakah, you feel a little bad because I'm losing that. But you get a little older, you realize, oh, tzedakah is really gaining something. And over here, obviously, it's the loss of the soldier. But the soldier has died. Soldiers, you know, volunteered to go to war in Israel. It's a sense of dying for something bigger, something worth. Va'aviv imo poshtim et yadam, and his mother and father, though, put out their hand. Mevakshim le'shivo, they want to take him back. Derech hapetach hatzar, through the narrow slit. Right, when you're a little kid, you might want to get the money out of the tzedakah box. But if it has a lock on one side and you have to get it out of the slit, you don't get it. Very frustrating. If you've ever tried it as a kid. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Right, like the innocence of the child. Yes, you're right. Right. It's the father and mother, right? Soldiers in Israel have a father and mother, their kids. And you want to take them back. Right. The soldiers like when it's tzedakah. It's giving, right? It's total giving. You give it away. I mean, when a parent sends their child to war, on some level in Israel, right, they're giving them away.
Like in the English, it's saying is falling, but then the title is fallen. Is that first line correctly translated? Is it is falling?
I don't know. Anybody good Dikduk expert? Nofal, he fell. Who nofel, he falls. But Chayal nofel. Oh no, Chayal nofal would mean a soldier fell. Chayal nofel is a fallen. But it would mean also Chayal nofel, a soldier falls. It would mean both. In other words, if it's a verb, it's falls. If it's an adjective, it's fallen.
The moment of time, like when you drop money in a box, but it has not yet gone, eats it up. Like when a soldier goes off to war, knowing that they probably will, maybe like that, but they haven't yet.
Yeah, they do.
Like
they
it's
know
that
it.
moment before and so they can start the action. They want something like that.
Yeah. Oh, right. They look through that now. I'll just look at the two poems quickly. There's a poem that's on the top of the page, first page that we looked at. Very short poem by a woman who is a psychologist and poet. That's all I know about her from doing research. And this poem, I found this also deep and kind of comforting. Hevant, you understand. Arafel lo mastir, the fog does not hide. At mashiesh, what's there, what there is. Hu mashiesh, it is what there is. Any thoughts about that? Fog does not hide what there is. Fog is what there is. I mean, on a certain level, right? It's darkness, right? Darkness can hide things. Sometimes, right, if you talk about darkness as a more as tragedy, as mourning, as emotion, there's just darkness, right? A person, we could talk that way. It's not a darkness that hides something else. It's just dark. Now, among in Chassidut, there's a sense that that's where you find God, darkness. It's in pain that you find light. So to me, this sort of conjured that up. Arafel also is kind of a religious word, you know, Arafel. Arafel kind of refers often to, find it in Tanakh a lot. You can also have a term like hell or something. Okay, I'll end with a poem. This is also a poem that I kind of wonder about. This is not a particularly religious poem, but again, I think in the light of my thesis, perhaps all these poems are religious. And this is Avital Litman. Nowadays, one has to check. This is, I think, on the last page I gave you. Bamilon Hamafunim, right? We know that after October 7th, people from the South had to all go and live in hotels. They're still living there. People from the North now are living in hotels. I mean, the hotels are just filled, you know, because there aren't very many tourists. But people have been living for, you know, almost a year in a hotel. And when I was in Israel in November, I met with some of the displaced people from Sderot. They were in a hotel in Jerusalem, and you know, it's like the whole family was living in one room, and it's very hard. Bamalon Mafunim Bayam Melach, in an evacuees hotel at the Dead Sea. Yosefet Yafeh Yafeh. She carefully gathers. Now Yafeh Yafeh means carefully gathers, but Yafeh means beautiful. She beautifully gathers. At Saor Habu Baba Seret. She gathers the hair of a doll in a ribbon. Now, ribbon and movie are the same word, right? Because movie film. Kosheret mimnakeh miktarot minatzets al seret. She attaches a sparkling pipe cleaner to the ribbon. Vaz shoelet, and then she asks, Tagidi, tell me, ani chaya, am I alive? Right? One supposes this is a girl who was there in the South when it happened, obviously, and she probably saw death. How do I know if I'm dead? Now, I think it could also mean, how do I know that I have died? That I am dead. Mahayitem onim. What would you answer? Liyalda bat arba, to a girl of 4. So here's the answer I guess she gave. Rakmi shecha yachol itchabek. Only one alive can hug. Vo'i nitchabek. Come and we'll hug. V'nirai menachnu b'chayim. And then we will see that we are alive. Now, nira'im menachnu b'chayim means we'll see if we are alive. I guess she means to say we'll see we are alive. Afterwards, the girl says, let's also check tomorrow morning. I mean, it's really, it really puts you, you just, I'm sure it sounds like it's something that happened, you know, it seems like it's an image that, imagine for a lot of the young children who were displaced, that is the case. A lot of the language it's childish language, and gives you a sense of there's more poems to do. There's much more than I've placed here. There's a whole kind of world of this. You know, a lot of it obviously is accessible online in Hebrew. Some of it's been translated, but maybe we'll do one more class at some point. Some other material. Okay. Wish everybody a meaningful rest of